You're my go-to. Okay. Now, Tanya, you're on the general question, right? Okay. So just on the amendment, is there any objection to the amendment as stated? We're still going to debate the question. Hearing none. The amendment is adopted as written. Thank you.
I was going to comment on it.
On the amendment, it's already closed. Let's do the general question. You can do another motion to amend if there's a big issue.
Tanya Robertson, SD11.
Yes.
Inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Do these guidelines hold the same weight as our bylaws do?
The charge of the committee, well, yeah, you're adopting, the committee cannot act beyond the scope of their authority, and you're granting the scope of the authority right now.
This body has historically sent items like this to the Rules Committee. And with that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we do that.
So the motion is to what? Refer the question to Rules Committee?
We refer this committee's guidelines to the Rules Committee, or formation to the Rules Committee.
Okay, there's a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Second by Mr. Morales. The first thing I'd say is I would oppose this vociferously because, number one, we would completely waste an entire election cycle, including an election that's getting ready to take place on December 11th for 3 Houston ISD trustees who have a very, very real chance of winning and helping to put those seats in Republican hands. Hold on one second. Second of all, we do not traditionally refer committee charges to the Rules Committee, since special committees are not in the rules. The scope of authority is set forth in what we're doing right now. So I would ask, since it's before the entire body, we can limit the scope of this committee. What this sounds like to me is an effort to kill it without killing it. And if we do so, we will be making the decision as a body that the SREC and the Republican Party of Texas is not going to be involved in local elections. That's what's effectively going to be.
May I speak to my motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the agenda, it wasn't specified that this was a special committee, and we already, as a state party, like you stated, can participate in local elections, and we have done so in the past. I've witnessed it in my SD. There's just a lot of questions. It's the unknown. This just came up, this week, and I just think it would settle the body if we had specific guidelines coming from the Rules Committee, and there's nothing stopping you from appointing a special working group. We've had working groups in the past, and it doesn't stop them from actually working.
I don't see I don't see how it's advisable to form a working group that is completely unrestrained next to forming a special committee that has clearly delineated guidelines and limits to their power. Because if there's a working group, there is absolutely no limit to what they do. They can communicate with any county party, issue suggestions, issue assistance, whether or not the county party consents. I would submit that passing this in this form would put more limits on the committee, and I don't think I would be as comfortable with a working group. But, Mr.
I echo everything the chairman said, especially your last point. I would remind the body that a vaccine mandate committee was created by the officials committee with no approval from the body, with no review of committee scope. A convention contingency committee was created by the officials committee with no vote by the body and no review of committee scope. A long-term planning committee was created by the officials committee with no input, with no review by the full body and no review of committee scope. This special committee is actually going through 10 times more scrutiny than any other special committee that we have created. And this language actually puts more limits on this special committee than on any other special committee we have created. In RPT rules, it is already very clear that only the SREC can endorse and take policy positions on behalf of the party. We've added the bullet point reiterating what is already in RPT rules. So I don't know what else we can do. When people say there are questions and they want reassurances, I don't know what else we can do. I mean, this is so limited. I would encourage you to please review the scope of this, and it is very limited. And as far as why we need a special committee versus informal task force, it gives them very important credibility when we go to county parties and try to educate them about the things they can do to get involved in local parties. Because we do want to send a message, from the RPT, it is important to send a message to all the county parties. Hey, you can get involved in local races, and it's something that you should be doing, and here are some ideas for how you can go about doing that. So that's all we're doing, and I think it's important to, when we do that, to have the full support of the full body, so that the county parties know this isn't just like some, Rolando Garcia from Harris County who wants us. They're getting the message that the whole SREC, that the full party is really behind on getting involved in these nonpartisan races.
Yeah. And by the way, the question right now, just to be clear, is whether or not to refer this to the Rules Committee. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, Steve Evans, SD 28, I rise against this motion to commit. I appreciate Tanya's thought process on this. I love giving my committee the oversight to make sure that we draft things properly, but this is not a rule. We get lost often in working group, standing committee, and special committee, and what we do is we use those words to try to avoid notice and try to avoid and dance around the involvement. A committee is a committee. We either involve it in our bylaws or you appoint a special committee and we go to work. Rolando made the point that I was going to make, that our bylaws already prohibit us from endorsing without the full vote of this SREC. So there's protections in place. The amendment that we've already put in place prevents endorsement. And I'll add, not germane to the discussion, but the Democrats are kicking our butts at this already. We're behind the 8 ball. And to throw this into committee and wait another election cycle just puts us further behind. Lubbock County is getting their butts kicked in school district races and city council races. I apologize for speaking. It's not germane, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and one of the things I asked, just because we do have a completely packed meeting and we still have resolutions to go through, is if you're against a particular question, rather than vote against the question, because every time we amend in certain ways, it does open up a whole new debate and lengthens the process by quite a bit. So, yes.
Sean Cheeman, SD 17. I had a 15-minute speech also objecting, but I'd like to call the question.
You're ready for the question. This is just on the amendments to refer the question to committee, to the Rules Committee. Okay? So right now we're going to be voting on whether or not to refer to the Rules Committee only, is the amendment. We'll stop the question over. All in favor of referring the question to the Rules Committee, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All against, please say nay. Nay. Nays have it. The amendment fails. Or the motion fails.
Did we vote on the motion of the previous question, or did we vote on the motion to commit? We should have taken a vote on the previous question.
Oh, we took a vote on, okay.
I'm fine with that, I just want to be clear what we
Sorry.
voted on.
I took that out of order. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that you called the previous question, not the question. All in favor of creating a new special committee? What? Oh, I'm sorry.
On the motion.
Everybody in favor of closing the debate, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. Now, the question is, on the creation of the new special committee entitled the Local Government Committee as outlined in the above. Everybody in favor of the question?
This is what we're referring it to the rules now. First we.
No, it's not. It's the previous question. That's what we already did. Yeah, he called the previous question. Oh, gotcha.
So then the main question before the committee is still on.
Apologies, we have the motion to commit that is currently being voted on. So you are now voting on the question, the motion to commit, which I thought we already voted on, but I want to be clear on. Currently, what you are voting on is the motion to commit to the Rules Committee. Okay? If you are in favor of committing the question to the Rules Committee, please indicate by saying aye. If you're opposed, indicate by saying nay. Nay! The nays have it. The motion to commit fails. Now we have the general question on the formation of the committee. Debate is open.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
and Deborah SB9, I just would like for you to delineate, please, for me, the types of party resources that can be allocated, as indicated right there in the first line right there.
Well, we don't have a budget item for them, so it isn't money or anything that requires specific expenditures like texts or other things. So generally, you're talking about manpower or time of people who are salaried. Things like our email lists, where we can send emails targeted to a particular zip code without an extra expenditure of money, which we've done in the past in local races, or our brand, our goodwill. If they choose to use it, should the SREC endorse a candidate, and only if they endorse, should they be able to use our brand. But the brand would be on the table as well. If there's no endorsement, it would generally be email lists for time. Yes.
Gail Stanart, SB 15. When this first came across my inbox, Mr. Chairman, I was concerned about a number of things, just like all of you people. And my counterpart who was behind it was not very happy with me. My concerns about it, and as you know, I am a rules person, and I am all about the bylaws and following rules. And my concerns have been completely allayed in that arena, and I wanted to let the body know that. But also, I wanted to add just a little bit of the vision that I have gotten from this, and because of the things that have gone on, and I'll make this very brief. We are going to grow our pool of candidates from nonpartisan to a higher level. We have got to develop that pool now. I have been watching the Democrats do that in Harris County for the last 10 years. And we have gone from being solidly Republican to solidly Democrat because they did exactly what we're talking about here. They started putting people on the Harris County Department of Education. They took it completely over. We have one nominal Republican there that doesn't agree with us anymore. And we lost that opportunity to take care of that. We are looking at our school boards, and we are so horrified by what we are seeing there, and yet we do not have the resources that they are able to procure from their vendors to fund their PACs. In the case of Sci-Fair, praise God, they got involved in Sci-Fair this time. We have done this for 15 years in that district and have continued to have problems until the county party got involved at this level, and we were able to recruit qualified candidates because there was going to be a partnership. And we did not do that in Klein ISD, my district, and we failed 3 out of 3. I am so excited about us seeing the future and knowing that we need to be growing our candidates for every level from the grassroots up, and this is where we start. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Steve Evans, SD 28. I know we're way behind schedule. Just quickly, I want to remind this body that you always have oversight over every committee. You can always take anything the committee's doing and bring it back to the floor if you don't like what they're doing. We always have oversight of the full body. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I agree. This is a much-needed committee. And speaking because I put a lot of time in that Sci-Fair race, but what I was concerned, and I think the chairman addressed this, my concern, and I was asked by both the county chair and our district director that going back to what happened in Harris County on that race, the legislator in that district was supporting, probably personally, another conservative candidate. We had a 19-year incumbent, make this real brief, but he was campaigning on killing police is freedom of speech. So we had to get him out. So there was the incumbent, and then we had 2 Republicans. One had tens of thousands of dollars in her bank account, and the other one had $15.74. So if it had been some of the upper level in our county that made the decision on who we would endorse, it probably would have been the candidate with the tens of thousands of dollars. But when it went down to the executive committee, who really should have the vote, that the county chair said, we're going to way out of this, we're going to get out of this, and it is up to the executive committee. So the executive committee voted 2/3 to support the candidate that had $15.74 in our bank account. Consequently, I think we've addressed it, but both my county chair and district chair said, just to make sure that the approval to endorse, which I'm understanding now, we don't even have that, but in the future, if this does become a standing committee, to just make sure it's not the county chair, but the executive body. So, that's all.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, if there's no objection to closing debate, debate is closed. We're now going to call the question. And the vote on the question right now is on the formation of a new special committee entitled the Local Government Committee, whose purposes and limitations are set forth as projected above. All those in favor of the formation of the Local Government Committee, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. Ooh, are we doing it? No, it's not. The ayes have it. The motion passes. The motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to the officials committee reports.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we were under the impression that this was going to be a recorded vote and not a voice vote. The matter would be voted on this.
Are you calling for a record vote on it?
The color was very voted, but it was on the computer.
The point of order is overruled. It's not a timely point of order. Moving along to the officials committee. The officials committee has met 3 times to develop and approve a draft budget to be submitted to the SRAC for adoption. Brandon, can you project the budget? So here's a summary of the budget that we put together. I think it was a very conservative budget. It was one that what we wanted to do was focus, instead of figuring out what we wanted to do and spend money on and then just hoping we get the money to pay for it. What we wanted to do was first develop our revenue estimates and what we truly believe we're actually going to take in, something that's attainable, that's not a reach, and then look at funding from operations and fit it into the revenue targets we had. We also put together wish list items, or one wish list item that we are hoping to get either dedicated funding for, or if we exceed our revenue targets, which, I mean, I honestly think is likely that we will exceed our revenue targets, that we will be able to fund. We also included in all of our wish list items, which I think is very important, is in the past, we've done wish lists before. The mistake that can be made is you don't fund management and administration of those items. So each of the new wish list items you do takes away from our current administrative budget. So we baked in, I think on this item, about 20% for administrative expenses for each of the wish list items. So if we do get dedicated funding, everything is actually covered in it. Our projected expenses were $1.647 million with a monthly average of $137,295. Our projected fundraising revenue was $1.8 million with a monthly average of $150,000. With that comes to a projected monthly surplus of $12,755 based on projected personnel of 11. Keep in mind those numbers do not include items like the convention, which are traditionally off budget, and we try not to do flow-through money. We want to give you a picture of actually what the operational budget is for the office. Now, if you go to the next slide, this is our wish list item, which includes $250,000 for Tanya's proposal that we discussed in June on election integrity, personnel and management of EDO/EI activities funded outside of operational funding. We put an asterisk that other wish list items will be funded contingent upon RPT reaching 6 months of operational funding and reserves. We felt if we put wish list items, we are funding them. If we have the money, we want to set a goal for savings. And just like personal expenses, we want to have 6 months in reserve in case something happens. We would like to have 6 months of expenses in reserve as well. It's attainable. It's somewhere around $800,000. We had that earlier on this year. We can get to it again, and we want to do that before we engage in any large items. Now, effectively, the question was asked in officials committee, when you reach it, then do you fund it? No, the baseline of 6 months in your head is a zero. So anything above that can be used to fund other items. And is there any other slides? Okay. And that's what we have for our budget. I'm going to on behalf of the officials committee, I move adoption of the proposed budget as projected. Is there any discussion? Yes? Oh, second. Right. Terry Harper. Is there any discussion? If there's no further debate, all in favor of the adoption of the 2022 budget, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. The ayes have it, and the budget is adopted. And the last item of business we have is committees. First of all, for the first motion I'd like to make is appointment of the SREC members to the local government committee. If there's no objection, I'd like to appoint Rolando Garcia, Peter Lazan, Carmen Calderon, Kelly Perry, Rhonda Anderson, and Walter West to the committee. Is there, with Rolando Garcia to chair and Peter Lazan to vice chair. Is there any objection to the appointment of those members to the committee? Hearing none, those members are appointed to the committee. Secondly, I would like to take a further matter of additional appointments to other SREC committees. I want to indicate ahead of time that when I give you this list, there are one or two people that I believe we've already approved on the committee, but for purposes of the record, I want to make sure that the appointments were on the record at a meeting. But most of them are new members. So if there's no objection, I would like to appoint the following members to the following committees. Ready, Virgil? I'll give you my sheet when I'm done. To the Legislative Priorities Committee, Emily Cook and Russ Linus. To the Election Integrity Committee, Kiko Canseco. To the Rules Committee, Emily Cook. To Long-Term Strategic Planning, Peter Lazan. To the Partnerships and Coalitions Committee, Dan Tully, Kelly Perry, Walter West, and Rhonda Lacey. To Party Org, Peter Lazan, Russ Linus. To Resolutions, for purposes of the record, David Covey, Dan Tully, and Jim Pickle. To Engagement, Fernando Garcia. To the CRC, Kiko Canseco and Fernando Garcia. And to the Vax Mandate Special Committee, Jim Pickle. Are there any objection to the appointments as proposed? Vaccine mandate should be. Are there any objections to the committees as proposed? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. The committee members are confirmed. I'm going to move on since we're actually ahead of schedule. What's that? Yeah. They'll start serving lunch in 8 minutes. So, the next item of business, I don't expect to take longer than that. Steve and Jill, you ready? Consideration of Rule 44 resolutions from counties. Three counties, Harrison, Panola, and Marion, have passed very similar resolutions censuring State Representative Chris Patty and asked the SREC to take certain actions. They're now asking the question of what is the pleasure of the body regarding these resolutions. Ms. Glover.
Jill Glover, SB 12. Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to postpone these actions on Rule 44 resolutions until after December 13th, because the actions would be rendered moot if the candidate does not run for office. But if he does, we can pick those back up.
There's a motion to postpone until after December 13th. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion.
There is a second. Discussion's open. Is there any discussion? Are you ready for the question? All in favor of postponing these resolutions until after December 13th, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay. The motion passes. The censure resolution consideration is postponed until after December 14th, correct? 13th or 14th? 13th, that's right. Thank you. We are going to break for lunch. Lunch should be ready in about 6 minutes. So, and we will reconvene at what time we got? What time is Richard? 12:30.
12:15.
12:15.